And to discuss the Ukraine crisis in more detail, here is James Jatras. He is the Deputy Director of the American Institute in Ukraine. You were just here the other day, and things just keep changing and evolving on a day-by-day basis. Yesterday, the acting president said that the government was helpless to really do anything about this. Now they're instituting the draft. Will that change the complexion of things at all?
If it does, it'll change it for the worse. It's interesting. Every time we meet, every time we talk, it's worse than when we discussed it before. And it seems that's the direction we're going in now. That if you listen to these stories, you look at that footage, you see how, this is taking on more and more the air of a civil war kind of situation where families and neighbors, regions of the country are being split apart. There's this animosity, this violence now that's growing up. This line that we hear, unfortunately, from our government in the United States and from some of the Europeans is somehow, oh, the Russians are all behind this. I don't doubt that the Russians are involved, but you can't just chalk it up to that. Look at these people out there. There are a lot of people that don't like the administration in Kiev. They don't think it's legitimate. And just trying to, we're going to mobilize troops now. We're going to send the army in. That could cause a civil conflict, but it doesn't resolve the legitimate differences that exist in Ukraine.
Remarkable imagery there in Donetsk, where you see these police officers trying to guard this building.
Mm-hmm.
They're stripped of their vests, their weapons, their dignity in many respects.
That's right.
What do you make of that?
Well, a couple of things. My immediate thought at seeing that footage was how much it reminded me of some of the footage we saw in Kiev in November and December and January before the Yanukovych government collapsed there. The other thing that struck me too is that unlike a lot of other places in the East where the police supported the demonstrators or went over to the other side, here there seemed to have been some token resistance, but eventually they decided it wasn't worth risking their lives to defend a government in Kiev that maybe they're not so wild about either.
Well, it certainly doesn't look like a job you'd want in any part of the world at this stage.
Not at their pay, I'll tell you that. Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, there was talk. I had an analyst on last night who said it may be a good idea just to postpone the election, which is slated for later this month. What's your take on that?
I think that would be an excellent move because I don't even see how they're going to hold the election in the east of the country, certainly, and maybe in parts of the south as well. Having the election will do nothing to create what would be nationally acknowledged as a legitimate government that all Ukrainians could rally around. I think the only way you could have an election is to step back from this confrontation, this threat of armed force, to say, okay, fine, we need to discuss a constitutional order, we need to discuss regionalization, regional rights, language rights. Let's agree on that and then have an election that has a more mutually respectful structure for the different parts of the country.
I remember early on, after Yanukovych left, there was a guest on, and I asked him, is there a concern that Ukraine might splinter? Now it almost seems like, how could it not? It seems as though it's happening almost on a day-by-day basis. Is that how you see it?
I think that's where it's going. If you can have unity within diversity. If you can have a federal structure, a confederal structure, where the different parts of the country have substantial powers and then agree on a unified national structure that's based on local respect, yes, maybe you can hold the country together. I think that's still possible. But if we're going to insist on just the West and Kiev subjugating the East, if that's the model, it's simply not going to work, and that will tear the country apart.
I'm nervous to ask you this question because things change almost hourly there. But what does Ukraine look like a year from now, do you think?
I don't think it's predetermined. I think it could go either way right now. But the longer this kind of attitude of just force the East to submit goes on, which cannot be successful, the greater the likelihood that the country splits apart.
James, thanks so much for coming in. Always a pleasure.